Hare Krishna, everyone, and welcome to another session of Prabhupada Memoirs. And today, I'm so fortunate to have His Grace Rupa Vilas Prabhu, who has joined us. A person, as you know, we want to hear about Srila Prabhupada directly from his direct disciples. And they help us to share some of their insights, inspiration that's inspired them for so many years. Since 1971, Prabhu has been part of this movement and started in the USA. And he's been a Sankirtan leader. He's also been part of the magazine side of things, and also those famous spiritual sky incenses that used to come out in those days. He's also a qualified master's student, and he was a teacher, a secondary school teacher as well for a few years as well. So it wasn't that he came straight into the ashram. He actually did that as well. So it's so amazing to hear about that. And we're going to be talking about all these aspects of Prabhu. So I just wanted, before saying any more than that, is welcome His Grace Rupa Vilas Prabhu. How are you, Prabhu?
Thank you. I'm fine. Good health, happy. So I'm just curious because the screen seemed to go on and off a lot. Is that a technical hitch, or are you experiencing the same thing?
It might be to do just. It might be to do.
And the pictures go out and then they come back on. But right now it seems fine.
Yeah, it's to do with, it might be internet connection. Usually that's the reason it usually happens. But okay. We can see you fine. I wanted to start, Prabhu, before even thinking about talking about you joining. We'd love to hear your history a bit more. Like I mentioned before, you went to university, you're in secondary school teaching. So what was Rupa Vilas Prabhu prior to joining the Hare Krishna movement?
I think probably a fairly typical member of the of the counterculture. It was very prevalent in the 60s. When I say a member, I mean I was kind of like a hidden member, because I did the normal that were expected, like going to university, getting some kind of a job, which in this case, the main reason I got into teaching was to stay out of the draft, which at that time, many people in our group were all being drafted into the Army or the Marines or some other armed service force. Right. So we were against that. That was pretty much the mood of the counterculture. They were against the war in Vietnam. They were against most of what they thought normal society, was all about, which is about rules, jobs, having a mortgage, having a family, living a normal sort of, quote, normal life. And there was a sort of rebellion against all of that. So I would say I was typical of that, although I had a teaching job for a couple of years in the secondary school in Georgia. I was at the time living in Tallahassee. So after those 2 years, I decided I'd had enough, and I was, I felt that I was selling out to the ordinary, what was ordinarily expected. So we got this. At that time, I was living in a sort of a communal situation, which means that we were sharing a house, with friends. We adopted a vegetarian diet. We were doing yoga and asanas and things, and then I had a chance to go out to a friend who was part of the counterculture in San Francisco. And they were, at that time, San Francisco had about 400 communes, what they call communes, which were kind of like ashrams without rules. People lived jointly. They shared a kitchen, and everything was done in a kind of a mood of sharing. But there were no rules,
So we just this is we're just going to just check we get Prabhu back. So it is just, we got internet. We're just getting you back, hopefully, Rupa Vilas Prabhu. We just check that. So everyone that's joining, if you have any questions while we just wait for Prabhu to come back, please do ask. And
Okay.
I'll able to see the questions coming on my side here. And then, of course, any questions you have, please put them, and then I'll check those and then try and bring them up. So we're just back. We just had a little cut, but that's fine. We're back on. You are here. So you were talking.
Yeah, in 1969, they went up to San Francisco, and there was a friend of mine living out there in a commune. They had many communes in the Bay Area of San Francisco. And as I said, without rules, without any, they were sharing everything and trying to live what they considered a more ideal sort of life. In this particular commune, they called cauliflower, spelled Kaliflower, cauliflower, which they had, because the devotees were already very active in San Francisco since 1967, and they had been influenced to some degree by the devotees. So I was living in this commune and kind of mystified about the whole situation, because I was thinking that it didn't seem very spiritual. It seemed more kind of all about enjoying the senses. And I've been reading books about Zen Buddhism, thinking, this doesn't seem like a very spiritual sort of situation, because they touted themselves as being like a new culture full of spiritual values. So at one point, they had a free print press. And different communes had different services that they offered. If this is too lengthy, you can just cut me off. But they did all their. Some people supplied clothes. Some people supplied medical, automobile repair. At this particular commune where I was staying, Cauliflower had a free print press. So anything you wanted printed, they would print in exchange. They had a barter system. So they said, "Do you want to go on the? We're going to deliver our newspaper to the different communes. Do you want to go and see some of the different?" It turns out that on Frederick Street there was an unusual commune called the Hare Krishna Commune, and I went with one of the members of Cauliflower, and outside there was this international Sankirtan party on the bus.
Right. We're getting a bit cut, so I'm just checking. No, you're back. So you were talking about this Hare Krishna commune, and
yes, we visited this. We were distributing the Cauliflower newsletters, which they gave the news of the communes, and one of the news items always was the feast at the Hare Krishna temple. So we were going around. We went to Big Brother and the Holding Company, which was a famous band in San Francisco. We went to the commune then we came to this Hare Krishna commune. And so I asked this person I was with, well, what do they believe? And he said, well, they have a spiritual master. I said, wow. That was quite impressive at the time. There weren't many, it wasn't such a common thing. And they said, and they shave their heads. Well, that was revolutionary, because at that time, the whole point was to grow your hair as long as possible. And shave their heads. And they said, and then he paused and looked around, almost like it was a conspiracy or something. He said, they believe they're from other planets. And I thought, wow. I realized later that because the book, Easy Journey to Other Planets, was being prominently distributed at the time. And it had this picture of a devotee flying through space with Channing Japa and kind of doing this sort of, intergalaxy sort of travel through space. So they said, so do you want to go in? And I said, no. I was frightened off. So it took me a couple of years of, I managed to meet the devotees in Montreal at one stage, having driven across Canada as part of that trip out to the West Coast. And we went up through Canada and all the way back over to Montreal, where some friends of mine were living.
Wow.
And there at the temple in Montreal and met some nice devotees. I was a little more interested in it, but it took me until 1971 to actually move into a temple in Florida. So that was my early experience.
You were a person that was, of course, in the professional world. Like you mentioned, you didn't start like the hippie aspect as well, even though you had the culture. You had a job going on as well, from what I could hear. And you about 25 you were.
Hiding behind my job. Yeah,
I
I had this job, but that was just to cover, so that I wouldn't get drafted, or I didn't. Finally, they had me come in to take the test for the draft, and I managed to fail it somehow. So they let me alone.
So
Yeah,
that's what they used to do.
That was very common too. People, like, I know that Tamal Krishnamurti tells a great story about going into the draft board with a huge picture of Nrsingadev and saying, "This is my God." And they were so startled by the very idea that this ferocious-looking lion-like figure was ripping somebody apart, and he was announcing, "This is my God." And of course, they didn't want him for the army after that. So there were a lot of different tactics for getting out of this obligation, which none of us believed in at the time.
Wow.
We didn't want to be dead in Vietnam, because usually, if you had a college education and you went into Vietnam, they'd make you a first lieutenant, which meant you'd be leading a group of men who didn't trust you because you were green. You were brand new, and they often either got shot by the enemy or shot by their own men because they didn't want to. They felt that they were in a dangerous situation, being led by an inexperienced person.
Wow.
Friendly fire. They used to call it friendly fire. So we didn't want to avoid that.
Wow, never heard about that. That's
Yeah.
Thank you for. Wow, that sounds so. Of course, in 1971, it was in Florida. You joined. I think in US in Florida, you joined the temple.
Yeah, it was a small preaching center, and I was interested, but I was a little reluctant to act because I saw what a commitment it was. All the other gurus that had come to the West, it's kind of like, oh, here, you buy this mantra, and in 6 months you'll be God kind of approach. And I wasn't interested in that. I could understand that spiritual life was a serious commitment. And when I studied the devotees the way they were living, I was very impressed. At the same time, I was pretty intimidated by it. 4 regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds, going out in street sankirtan. I mean, it was very, very straight on in those days. The typical schedule in a temple was, 16 rounds, studying all the books, going out in street sankirtan for 4 hours, say, and then in the afternoon going door to door with Krishna books. That was the book to try to sell in those days. They printed all these Krishna books in 1970, and they wanted to sell them, so that was one of our things. And we would just use George Harrison as our mantra for getting in the door. George Harrison recommends this book. Oh, okay. Then people were interested. He actually did a lot of service indirectly to the movement, aside from the direct service that he did. That was the way that he served the book distribution teams that were going out in the early 70s.
Wow, so you joined in 71, you get straight into it, doing book district sankirtan, going door to door. It sounds like a full on.
Because as I was saying to you earlier, we considered ourselves revolutionaries, or at least we wanted to shake things up from the status quo. And it seemed to us that here was a movement that was fully spiritual and revolutionary.
Yeah.
And so we were pretty fired up, and we just, whatever Prabhupada wanted, we were prepared to do it, or to try to do it. And, they made me an incense salesman for World Spiritual Sky. Incense was one of the backbones, one of the main supports of the movement in the early years, early 70s. And I wasn't that great as a salesman, but I managed to get some of it in the head, what they call the head shops, and the import stores and things like that.
Oh, you know what's?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, Malini Priti. Just because you said about the George Harrison example, she goes, we use George Harrison as an example even today for Sankirtan.
Well, he's remained a prominent and famous. I mean, being a member of the Beatles, it didn't exactly help. It actually obviously was going to, serve us well for a long time, because the Beatles are as famous today, practically almost as famous today as they were then, even though they're not, only two of them are remaining. But
No,
George was specifically very much involved at that time with the movement, was chanting, was helping to promote the movement, as you know. Anybody that's read the histories of Probability Lamrita and other books that have come out since.
So
Yeah.
you know the spiritual incense, spiritual sky incense. I believe in. I went to New Mayapur in France, and they had, I think, a factory just over the road or close to it, where they used to produce the incense there for their. But I gather in America they would have had in different places, and this was like.
Yeah.
That's
well, the main location for the business was Los Angeles. Then New Vrindavan started up as sort of a, I think it was somewhat of a rogue operation. but then, and you know, usually we would get the sticks in mass in big quantities, and then we'd have to, you know, put them all in packages, and you know, prepare them, and then take them to the stores, the retail outlets. See what we could. You know, you can imagine some of the salespeople when they would see us in those days. You know, everybody was dotied and sorried up, and you know, we'd walk into a store and they would be kind of like, "What is this?" You know, and so some people were enthusiastic, you know, to help, and some people were put off by it. So you never could, you know, you never were sure, but you just tried to be friendly and enthusiastic.
Wow. No, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I wanted to know as well. So, of course, years passed now. In 1972, I think you met Srila Prabhupada.
Yes, that's a nice. Yeah, go ahead. Ask your question.
No, so it's like how did you meet him, and how?
Well,
How was
I didn't exactly meet him, but here's what happened. I was associating with the devotees. This was before I'd actually moved into the temple, and they wanted to go up. They heard Prabhupada was going to be in New York, so we just jumped in this van. We picked up some more devotees in Atlanta, and the mode of travel in those days. Excuse me. The mode of travel in those days, if you had to be somewhere, say halfway across the country, in this case, New York was about, I don't know, a couple of thousand miles from where we were in Florida. You just keep driving, and people would drive in shifts. You know, some people would be sleeping in the back of the van, and then it would, you know, they would change drivers. So they sort of assigned me to be the driver. So I was just drinking the Mountain Dews, which had double the amount of caffeine that other drinks had, just to stay awake, so I didn't kill anybody, you know. And so they had me doing most of the driving, but we made it to New York, and that was the transforming incident. Maybe I could just read a small excerpt out of my book here.
that'd be great. And that's called the Without Fear. As you know, everybody, the title that we've put today, and I'm going to just put it on so everybody, and we'll be talking about the book in more detail as well. So Prabhupada Memoirs today is Without Fear, glimpses of Srila Prabhupada. So this is what we are talking about, and it'll be lovely to hear from experts from the book. And of course, if you want a copy, it's available on Krishna.com. It's available on Amazon, and you can see at the bottom it's scrolling the different places. But what I did was I put in Google Without Fear, then I put Rupa Vilasa Dasa, and then you will see it coming up. Amazing. And you can see at the top right hand corner of my screen, what you can see is you can see Without Fear there. So you've got a little book, what it looks like. So please, Prabhu, please share some of your insights.
Well, this was the Henry Street Temple in New York, which was where it had the building that had been acquired after the 26 Second Avenue days, and there were two entrances to the temple. It was a main entrance, and then a sort of a side entrance, not a side entrance, but another entrance in the front of the building. And I was waiting. I just read from the book. I waited expectantly on the temple steps for my first sight of Srila Prabhupada. I had seen his picture, read some of his writings, and heard his powerful chanting, and I was impressed by what I had heard up to that point. I had also heard some of the teachings of other gurus, but I wasn't very impressed with them. I didn't know what to expect, although I was convinced about the effects of chanting Hare Krishna. Then Srila Prabhupada stepped out of the car, and my world changed. I had never bowed down to anyone before, but I could immediately understand that he was that person I had been seeking, perhaps for lifetimes. I fell down to the ground and bowed down to him without reservation. He moved with a fluid, otherworldly grace, as though he were in a 3D film or hologram projected from another world to the earth. Immediately I began to understand what it meant to be in the world, but not of it. I dashed to the temple room, fighting for a spot near his Vyasa-san, an unusual and colorful op art creation. As he walked down the middle of the temple room after greeting the deities, he glanced left and right, and I had the same experience as many other devotees have reported. His eyes were filled with love and compassion, and he seemed to scan us and see deeply into our hearts. I was left feeling simultaneously exposed and blessed by his grace. Okay.
Wow, so descriptive. That's quite powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a powerful experience. I mean, it was all very foreign and unusual to me, but just his presence was so overwhelming. And I never felt anything like that before. I'd never experienced anything like that before. And it was just, I knew that I was finished. I mean, I knew I kind of had an insight at that point that my material life was finished.
Wow.
And so that was really you could say a pivotal point, in my time on this earth.
Wow. So you met, of course, you saw Srila Prabhupada like you just described, and it's just phenomenal to, just when you're reading that, for me personally, when that somebody had in such a, like you say, a glimpse of meeting that person had that impact on you instantly. When in your mind, of course, you wrote it down, but at that time, your feelings like you just come, and it was a bit of a shock, I gather. And you never felt like that before, I gather. It was just.
No, I mean, how can you just, when you have you could say a mystical or transcendental experience, you can't really compare it to anything else.
No.
What have you got to compare it to? You haven't really. You've got only. You might have been like I was kind of excited when I went out to San Francisco to see certain bands that I'd only heard about, and to hear them play was kind of exciting. But I didn't, have any kind of mystical experience or feelings of ecstasy. It was just like, oh, this is fun. This is interesting. Oh, this is exciting. But it's a completely different realm of experience, I think, and that's the unique character of it. And I think that's why you had so many people so transformed by their experience of seeing or hearing Prabhupada. And of course, I heard him speak in New York. I was sitting right near the Vyasa-san. Somehow I elbowed enough people out of the way. I wasn't very polite. And I was sitting next to Kirtanananda Swami, who he was listening to Prabhupada like with his, like almost like with his ear, like he was just totally focused on what Prabhupada was saying. And I couldn't understand everything he was saying, but he was citing Maharaj's mood of action.
So we just lost that part. You said that the rapt attention. You were saying, and you couldn't understand all the things he was saying, but then it cut a bit.
Okay, right, and then he. But I remember he was talking about the mood of Prahlad Maharaj, the compassionate mood of Prahlad, how he didn't care about himself, but he was concerned with love for all the people rotting in material existence. And I was thinking how most of the other gurus I'd heard about, they all talked about what's in it for me. The appeal was all about what's in it for me. What am I going to get out of this? And no, Prabhupada was thinking, what are we going to give? What are we going to do to help people come to this? In other words, the whole mood was opposite. what I had heard from others. It was all about, how I'm going to benefit. My health will be better, or I'll get some type of insight, spiritual insight. They often make the joke about the radio station, people being tuned into a radio station called WIFM. Do you know that radio station?
No, I don't. No.
What's in it for me?
Oh, okay.
So that's the radio station that many people tend to be tuned into. So I think that struck me at the time. I was so impressed by his mood of compassion and concern for others. He wasn't talking about what you're going to get out of it. He's talking about, well, let's get together and do something for all the people that are out there in the material world suffering. And I was very impressed, very moved by that. And when I did finally.
Just as so you're saying you did finally meet him, and that's where we got to, and it just had to go froze. Then I was like, oh my god, yes.
Sorry, what can I do?
No, don't worry, it's okay. That's why I'm just making sure, just in case you don't miss.
Because it was a big property. It was 2 church buildings connected by a courtyard. And it was a pretty big center. We had a lot of children that had gathered there from all over the world. And Prabhupada came there, I think it was 4 times altogether that he came to visit the Dallas temple. So when he came in 1972, we were trying to teach the children, but we had no idea exactly what he wanted in terms of our teaching them, how to direct them, and so forth. So because I was the only, you could say, qualified teacher, when I say qualified, I put it in speech marks or quotation marks, because I didn't really know what I was doing, what Prabhupada would want, what did he expect. So he held a meeting. Let's see if I've got. Maybe you'll be able to see this. This is when he held this meeting. All right.
Yeah. The other way.
I can't. There's a reflection, isn't there? Oh, there it is. Better. That's me. It looks like he's pointing the stick at me. That's me right in the front there.
Yes.
Where he's pointing the stick. And so he held this meeting with some of the students and the teachers. And we were asking him all kinds of questions. I had my notepad and was asking him questions about what did he want, how should we teach, how to do everything. And he was giving me instruction. And he actually, at one point, he held up 2 sticks. He had these 2 pointers, and he said, this one is for the students if they misbehave. But he wasn't entirely serious, and we didn't actually understand what, a lot of times Prabhupada would be joking about things, and you'd take it dead serious because you thought everything he said was dead serious. But he was often joking. But anyway, he held up the one, said, this one is for the students if they misbehave. And then he said, and this one is for the teachers if they misbehave. Mm-hmm. And so then all the kids and the teachers started holding out their hands, so Prabhupada would give them a little whack with the stick. So that was fun. So that was just prior to that classroom meeting, because that was held in one of the classrooms in Dallas. But prior to that, we had met outside the temple. Prabhupada wanted to know who the teachers were. I was an uninitiated devotee at the time. So he asked the different teachers to stand up and be identified. So people were taking turns, and they would say, well, this is, I think it was a devotee named Stoka Krishna that was introducing us. And he goes, this one is so-and-so, this one is so-and-so. And so then they asked me to stand up, and I stood up. And it was almost like I felt like I was being scanned, like in the supermarket when they scan an item to see, whether it's legitimate, what the price is. Probably just had to look at me, and he just went like that, kind of gave me a nod. And that was it. I guess I passed the scan test. But, you always felt that way around Prabhupada, that he could understand exactly where you were, as we used to say, where you're at. He could understand completely what your mentality was, what your kind of level of conditioning was, what your level of commitment was. So it was always quite intimidating, for a newer devotee to be in Prabhupada's presence. So that was the beginning. I mean, he came to Dallas a number of times, and we had some wonderful meetings with Prabhupada and the teachers. Maybe I could just tell one other short story about Prabhupada. And
Sure.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm just checking. I can't hear myself. Okay, yeah, that's fine. I was hearing an echo before, but I was going to just sort something. But it's all good. I can hear you. Yes, please do share. This is so nice.
A meeting that Prabhupada had with the teachers. I believe this was, in 1974. And so Prabhupada, we've been asking questions and he'd been giving answers, and he was reading to us from, and it hadn't been published yet, the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam was still waiting to be published. So, but Dayananda, my godbrother, knew that there were instructions regarding Gurukul by Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto. So Prabhupada said, so what do you want? You want me to publish the 7th canto first? And Dayananda said, well, we're eager to hear. So then Prabhupada began talking right straight out of the 7th canto. But then he sort of shifted gears at one point, and he started talking about Vedanta and the impersonalists. And he said that, I'll just read a little section of it. He says about the so-called Vedantists, he didn't take them seriously, the Mayavadis, as Vedantists. He said, they are manufacturing an imitation Krishna by mental concoction. If they knew Krishna, then why would they manufacture Ram Krishna? So he went into a whole critique about Ram Krishna and Vivekananda claiming to be the same Ram and Krishna. So he said, if they're going to accept him, why not the original Krishna? What have they got against the original Krishna? So he was almost like challenging us, to say something, but it wasn't clear. But then he said that they don't understand Vedanta. He says, so why could he not understand? Supposing he has studied Vedanta, but why could he not understand Krishna? And why is he presenting a false Krishna? What is the reason? Tell me in your answer. So it was like we were really being put on the spot. Tell me in your answer. Vedaischa sarvaira hangeva vedya. Through Vedanta, Vedas, it is acknowledged that one can understand Krishna, but they did not understand Krishna. Why? Supposing they have studied all the Vedic literatures, but why did they not understand Krishna? What is the answer? So, you could see he was really pushing us, because he expected us to be reading his books and be able to answer his questions. He's sort of, testing us. So then there's one devotee named Ashok, who was a relatively new devotee from Bengal. And he said they did not understand the Vedanta. Srila Prabhupada, yet no, suppose they understood or studied. Yes, they did not understand. But why then? That is the question. Why did they not understand? So then Brahmananda said, Nahang pragasha sarvasya. I do not reveal myself. And we were thinking that was the right answer. It sounded right. But Prabhupada wasn't happy with it. He said, why does Krishna not refuse to be manifested to them? Why? I am asking why. So then Jagadish said, because they are envious of Krishna. Prabhupada didn't particularly care for that answer either. But then my godbrother Dayananda, he suddenly sat up, his eyes got really big. He said, because of Bhakti Vedanta. And Prabhupada said, And Dayananda, because of Bhakti Vedanta. Srila Prabhupada, yes, here is the answer. So it was very interesting, because Prabhupada was saying is, without Bhakti, how can you understand the end of knowledge? Vedanta means the end of knowledge. So without Bhakti, you can't understand the end of knowledge. And without Bhakti Vedanta. So it was such a perfect answer. He in other words, he'd answered with one word. Bhakti Vedanta, and Prabhupada was you could see Prabhupada's pleasure. And I just remember feeling, oh, I think I'm feeling, I hope it's transcendental envy. You know what I mean? I wasn't sure whether it was regular envy or transcendental envy, but I was really admiring that he had the insight to answer Prabhupada that way and completely satisfy Prabhupada. So, and that was our goal, you know, in those days, of course, it's just to do something that would give pleasure to Prabhupada. So, you know, and if you knew that you'd given him pleasure, that was like the ultimate award. That's the way we felt.
That was, I'm seeing a lot of comments coming through talking about Jay. That's amazing. Wow. I'm getting, people are really, let me just share. So here we got a person that's getting very, very happy. Prabhupada Books Ki Jai. Just getting Hare Krishna's Hari Bol. So it's so nice that these things that you're sharing. Here we go, another one. So true, Hare Krishna, mercy of our Grand Guru, Hare Krishna. So, you know, you can see that it's so nice that these pastimes that you've had, it's just had such an impact that, of course, you got your book, Without Fear, the glimpses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just touching on the surface now, but there's a lot of there's a lot of nectar in here. And I don't know when would be appropriate, but maybe I could just read at some point. Read Giri Raj Maharaj wrote.
Please, I think it'd be, because one thing, those that have read it will you know how it feels. But for those that haven't, and you need that little, should we say, understand a little bit more about it, it's better. He's got some reviews, and yes, please, can we have that from Giriraj Maharaj?
Yeah, it's just it's a paragraph, but it's just that I felt of all the reviews, he seemed to really get what I was trying to do, and he's a good writer besides. If any of you have read Giriraj Swami's books, they're very articulate. He said the author has covered so many topics with so much intelligence that it is hard to know where to begin or end in commenting on his newest book. And Without Fear, Glimpses of Srila Prabhupada, Rupa Vilasa Dasa has, with much evidence from Sadhu Shastra and Guru, as well as from his own personal experiences and those of his contemporaries, shown us that Srila Prabhupada is still alive, and that we can approach him through his Vani, his words. With beautiful personal accounts, he shows us that Srila Prabhupada is the most perfect, loving, compassionate, exemplary spiritual master one could ever want, conforming exactly to authoritative descriptions of self-realized pure devotees in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Prabhupada is available to us all when we actively approach him through his words, his instructions. As the author quotes Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, such great souls are not mere luminaries like the comets appearing in the firmament for a while and disappearing as soon as their mission is done. They are like so many suns shining all along to give light and heat to succeeding generations. By approaching Srila Prabhupada's Vani, we can experience his living, loving reciprocation. Without Fear is filled with Srila Prabhupada's words and words about him from his sincere followers. Lord Krishna said of himself, I do not live in Vaikuntha, nor in the hearts of the yogis. I stay instead, O Narada, in that place where my devotees sing my glories. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada is present where his devotees sing his glories. So it was such a nice review. My wife is signaling from another room. I didn't know. You don't have a copy of the book there, do you?
I do not. But fine. I do have, everyone. Look what I've got here. This is the actual. You can see in the top right-hand corner, but here's the book in a bit more, a bigger scale, where you can actually see it right now. Without Fear, Glimpses of Srila Prabhupada, and this is what it looks like. So, do have a look at this book, and really try to, if you want to help to understand Srila Prabhupada. There was one book for me as well that really touched me when I was first starting in Krishna consciousness. and everybody was saying about reading, etc. And for me, it was "What is the Difficulty" by Shruti Kirti Prabhu.
Nice.
And that really gave me, and I think this book, what you've got here, again, is giving that type of glimpse and more about Srila Prabhupada, how you're feeling and seeing Srila Prabhupada. So please do all check it out. You saw the links before, and we'll put the links back on again. Yes, Prabhu.
That's okay. I mean, I appreciate your plugging it that way because it's very kind of you. But anyway, anybody who's interested in these stories, at least you'll know how to get more of it.
That's
Thanks.
it. So
Thank
the main thing, what really helps is, and what we can all, because when it's in a book form though, it's like immortalized in a way, and we can at least at any point when we don't have, especially in this COVID situation, when sometimes we don't have association all the time around us, at least we have the association of the books, and we can have that type of sangha with the books, especially. And that's why for me it's important that we try to, like Srila Prabhupada also said, and this is something that's really important, that we need to read his books as well, and make sure we understand Srila Prabhupada's mood as well through his books. Yes, Prabhu.
I was just thinking I would explain about the title, why I got that title.
Without fear.
There's two things. One is most people know that Prabhupada's name, Abhay Charan out of India, the AC part of his title, means that one who is fearless, one who is without fear. Well, and I remember in Dallas, in one of his early lectures there, he said, he was giving a talk, and he said, someone asked after the class, because it was such a nice class, and so somebody raised the question, how does it feel to be a self-realized soul? They actually asked Prabhupada, what does it feel like? And so he just sat for a moment, considering the question. And then he just looked up and said, without fear. And then he just smiled, and this wave of ecstasy really swept through the room. And I remember at the time, I describe it a little bit in the book, just, my hair was standing on end, I was trembling, and I couldn't understand exactly what was happening, but it was almost like he'd given us a glimpse of what being fearless would be like. And just those two words had such a penetrating effect that people in the room were actually feeling fearless and ecstatic just for a few moments, And it was almost like an introductory offer to Krishna consciousness, what it would be like to be Krishna conscious. And that was a very, at least for me, that was a very powerful experience. And I talked to a few devotees afterwards, and they had experienced exactly the same thing. So that's the potency of an Uttamadhikari, that they, just by a few words, they can actually bring you to the point of ecstatic feelings. It may not last because of our conditioning, but at least momentarily we're there. We're actually there on that fearless, ecstatic, eternal platform. And so you get a hankering that you want more of that. But of course you have to work for it.
So it gives that nectar, but of course we have to work after that to try get that taster. That taster.
Yeah, somebody used to sell records and books like that. They say you'll get 7 books free, and then you join this book club, and then you've got to pay after that. Every month you get a new book, and you have to pay for it, or a new record, or whatever it is. So it's a little bit like you get a taster, you get an introductory offer, and then if you're ready to work for it, you can go further.
That's so, and actually Koji is just put so profound realization. Against and we got another Satya Sundari Singh saying devotees are fearless in this material world. So yes, they're definitely the Prabhupada disciples, what they did in those days. You definitely add that without fear, going to different parts of the world and doing what you all did was just phenomenal. It's the reason
we felt that Prabhupada would, give us whatever we needed to be able to do it. I just tell you a funny story. Once I was distributing Simply Wonderfuls. That was quite a you know, in the early days of the movement, Simply Wonderfuls. I don't know if you ever had a Simply Wonderful. There's
Yeah.
these little
Yes,
balls.
yes, the sweets.
Yeah, yeah. So that was very popular. We'd like to distribute them. So one time we were having a program in a vegetarian restaurant. This was in Florida. And they handed me a tray of Simply Wonderfuls and said, you know, go outside and see who you can get to take one. So I said, okay. So I went outside, and there I spotted, I don't know how much your listeners are aware of this group called the Hells Angels in America.
Yes, we heard of them.
A very terrifying motorcycle
Yes, yeah.
type of
Long
group.
Harley Davidson bikes and everything.
Yeah. Tough, very dangerous people, or can be. So I spotted a bunch of them out front, and I was thinking, well, should I offer them a Simply Wonderful? And I wasn't sure. Then I was thinking, this is Lord Chaitanya's movement. Everyone should get the mercy.
Wow.
We had that sort of, you know, attitude at the time. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go over and offer him one. And so I went over there with my tray of Simply Wonderfuls, and they all like turned almost as one, you know, just looking at me like, who is this? And so their leader was the biggest of them, you know, biggest guy of all of them, you know, a huge guy, about 6'7". So he looked at me and he said, it's okay. I know these people. You'll forgive me saying you. He said, this is some good shit, he said. And then boom, they just pounced on this tray, and all the Simply Wonderfuls were gone.
Wow.
And so they said, hey, this is good. So then I wandered off, and I was actually shaking. I was thinking, well, I must be crazy. What the world was I thinking? So that was funny. That was just a funny story.
Without fear, even though you were shaking.
I was temporarily fearless, and then afterwards I was scared. But I think a lot of devotees experience things like that, you know, taking risks, taking chances, trying to do something which they weren't sure about, but, you know, it's for Prabhupada, you know, let's do it. So there was that spirit, the very unifying spirit that we had, you know, that we wanted to, whatever would please Prabhupada, that was, let's do it. So that was nice.
No, thank you so much for sharing. So, you know, this aspect of being fearless.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
you like they say, practice what you preach. And you went in there to the Hell's Angels. If anybody knows, they're probably the most dangerous people. Well, at the time, you know, of course there was nice people, but you know, the image that was given off as well was.
Well, they were pretty. You know, they were often, you know, had quite a few drugs in them, and you know, you didn't want to like get them irritated. Sometimes they would act actually as in some of the old rock concerts. They used to be like the security force, but it sometimes led to disaster. The Rolling Stones did a concert, and they killed a few people who had attended the concert. So that sort of crossed them off the list of an appropriate security force. Wow. But they were a dangerous bunch of guys.
So there you go. If anybody didn't know about them, you do now. On Prabhupada Memoirs, you've heard it today. So, you know, like all this service you were doing in America, but of course there was a time you went to India as well. I think it was in 76.
Yeah, in Vrindavan from 1976 to 1987. I was working in the Gurukul in Vrindavan. And of course, from 76 to 77, I was also there at the time of Prabhupada's departure from this world. So those are pretty, because Prabhupada was there in Vrindavan a lot during 76, 77. And of course, that gave us more opportunities to hear him, or at least to go and chant for him in his room when he was very ill. We had these tiny little kartals. I'll tell you just one story in that regard, if that's all right. That's the only thing you could play when you did kirtan for Prabhupada in his room when he was bedridden and not able to go out and do anything anymore. And we would play these tiny little kartals because this loud kirtan was just too much for him. And so I went in with some Gurukul students. We had regular shifts. They would be chanting parties that would be going there throughout the day and often in the night as well, chanting for Prabhupada. And I went in with a group of Gurukul students, and I was chanting for Prabhupada, and I was trying to remember all the tunes that I'd heard Prabhupada chant, and, in different records and different recordings. And I wasn't always sure of the tunes, but I was trying to remember and just chant those tunes because I knew that at least he liked them. And so then my shift was over. I think we used to do an hour shift at a time, and I left. And then the next day I came to do my shift with some more students, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj stopped me at the door of Prabhupada's rooms, and he said, "Listen, you've got to chant for Prabhupada." And I said, "Well, okay, but why? Why me?" And because I was thinking maybe the students would like to have a chance to chant. He said, "Because," he said, "Prabhupada called me over after you left, and he said, 'Who is that chanting?' And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, "Why, was there anything wrong?" And Prabhupada said, no, it was nice. It was very nice." So then I got that one time, at least I knew that I got the approval. And you're never sure whether you were getting Prabhupada's approval or not. It wasn't always clear, because often we were serving mostly in separation. We didn't get that much, that many opportunities to directly associate with him. But at least on that one occasion, I knew that he'd been pleased by something I did. So, but that was nice. That was a nice experience.
That's nice. So touching as well. This aspect of this intimate service.
Well, it also made me appreciate Tamal Krishna Maharaj more, because he was really in that mood of anything that would amplify or encourage Prabhupada, or anything that would please Prabhupada. He wanted it to happen. That would be his first instinct. If something was displeasing, he'd want to know and do something about it. If something was pleasing, he'd want to, so that was his mood, and I was impressed. I was always grateful to him for letting me know, because he didn't have to. But he did it just to encourage me, and that was kind of him.
You know what's really nice? It's like a moral of the story here, like that. What you just said about Tamal Krishna Maharaj is that we ourselves, what I took a realization out of that was that we ourselves should be seeing a way of how to please Krishna, regardless who the other person is. If that's best to serving Krishna, bring them on. If you have a friendship or no friendship, it's the needful thing to do. And that's something that story, what you just said, is just what depicts for me that aspect of what we need. Do the needful, do the thing that would be most pleasing for Krishna, in this case most pleasing for Guru. And that's what
in Prabhupada's writings, he talks about how that was the mood of the gopis, even, that they would push that gopi forward who was doing something that was very pleasing to Krishna. So that mood of selflessness, not of thinking, well, this will please him, what this other person's doing, and let's push that person forward. That mood is very sweet, and it's very encouraging. So we should try to do that with our God brothers and God sisters. To always try to see who's doing some pleasing service and push them forward. Because if they're pleasing the Guru, then that's. Well, I was thinking, maybe just to tell you one last story, because I've told some that favor me. This one, not so much, but I think it's an interesting story. This was in Vrindavan, and Harikesh Maharaj was at that time Prabhupada's secretary and servant, and so he stopped me one day outside of Prabhupada's quarters, and he said that I wasn't properly doing this service of Gurukul. And I said, well, why do you say that? And he said, because you're too familiar with the children. You should be acting as their guru.
Gotcha.
Not as a not as a friend, but more like guru, instructive guru relationship. I said, well, that's not what I've learned. That's not what Prabhupada told me. He said to always just show love and to be kind and so forth to children. So we had a little debate about it, and then I had said, oh, I got to go. I've got some service I need to do. So I went upstairs. At that time, our Gurukul was in the guest house, in room 44 in the guest house, big room. So I went up there and I was feeling a little agitated because I was thinking, well, why is he getting on my case like that? I don't think like that. And next thing I knew, there was this furious knocking at the door. And so I opened the door, and there was a brahmachari standing there completely breathless. And he said, Prabhupada wants to see you in his room right away. So I was really shocked because I don't think I'd ever been summoned by Prabhupada as far as I could remember. So I said, oh, okay, okay. So I went into the bathroom to see if I had tilak on, because I'd heard that you should never go before the spiritual master without tilak. So okay, it's there. I ran downstairs, went into Prabhupada's quarters, offered my dandavats. And when I sat up, Prabhupada said, so, you think you're a guru? And I said, what? He said, you think you're a guru? Prabhupada repeated it, you think you're a guru? I said, I never said that. I don't think that. And I was looking around the room, and I was completely like startled, kind of, oh my God, what Prabhupada thinks? I think that? And I was looking around the room, I saw Hare Krishna, I said, he said that. I was trying to get out of it, I didn't want to be chastised or something. I didn't think that he said that. And then Prabhupada said to Hare Krishna, so what is this? So then Hare Krishna launched into this, I don't know, kind of convoluted explanation of why he said what he said. And then Prabhupada just kind of went, like, waved him off, like, okay, that's enough of that. And then he turned to me again, he said, you are not guru. I said, I know. And he went, that means shut up. He said, you are not guru, I am the guru. He said, you are the experienced disciple, and you are teaching the inexperienced, but you are not guru. Is it clear? And I said, yes, Prabhupada. And so he said, then he indicated that I should go. So I paid my obeisance and I went, and I was thinking, oh my God, now Prabhupada thinks I'm some half crazy nut devotee that thinks that he's guru. And I was kind of lamenting, oh, why did Hare Krishna get me into this trouble? And then Hare Krishna actually came and apologized and said, I don't know what, I'm sorry. I said, well, I must have deserved it, something I did in a previous life, who knows? But, I had some reflections about it afterwards, but I think that instruction was very relevant at the time, not because I had any aspirations, but because, maybe some other people did. And so him saying that in the way he did, I think was a very clear statement on what our mentality should be, not some puffed up conception of ourselves. Anyway,
Thank you.
I know our time is up now.
No, one thing, let me just put this on. Bhakta Anu Bhashya Dasa says, amazing insights with first-hand association with which made me happy and determined to perform Krishna consciousness devotion service. So thank you so much. I've got some just two things, if we can. Some others have asking questions, but first, what I want to do is, everyone, without fear, get the book. Check it out. You heard it's from Amazon. It's from the different places. And one thing I've got here is a question. Since you talked about youth, I think it's quite apt, especially for the youth of today. So Ami Anand's asking, so from that experience, how do you recommend we do deal with the youth of today, I would say. Any tips?
As an old person, I don't know whether I can tell you how to do it, but I would say just be kind, be encouraging, give them the tools they need, and then push them in the direction of kindness and compassion. I think that sometimes we forget that people need love. Tolerance, compassion, a loving spirit. We want to, you convince people by kindness and by compassion, I think, more than, by stricture. Sometimes people emphasize stricture and discipline so much that the feeling of love or the feeling of getting things done out of love. In fact, Prabhupada wrote me a letter once, and he said, he used those very words. He said, he said that we should discipline with love. Otherwise, they will take it badly. No, they will take it sadly. Actually, he said they will take it sadly if you don't, show them that affection, that concern, that compassion. I think that those are important things to deal with them. Encourage.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's thank you for that advice. And we should discipline with love, or they'll take it sadly. That's such a nice point. And thank you for your time. And I just want to say, it's been such a pleasure, such an honor to speak to you today, and to understand, those pastimes you had. It's just great. So thank you for your time today, for coming on. And I hope we in future can again have you on at some point. It'll be really nice. And anybody out there, the book Without Fear, Glimpse of Srila Prabhupada, and you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on. One thing I did, like I said at the start, go into Google, just put in Without Fear, then put in Rupa Vilasa Dasa, and you will get that coming up.
You can get it from me as well if you want.
Oh yes, and so if you wanted to contact Prabhu directly as well, and he's given me permission for this, you can contact Prabhu by contacting him on his email, which is rupavi1008@yahoo.com. So this is the place. So if you have any questions or you want to make contact, this is the place to do it.
If they're in the UK, I can ship them directly from my home if they want a copy. If they live, in other places, you have to use one of those other.
Perfect. That'd be, so there you go. So get in contact and then we'll sort it out. So on that basis, thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you
for having me. It was great. It was fun, actually. It's always nice to remember Prabhupada and to think of him.
Thank you.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
And Hare Krishna, everybody. Have a great rest of the Saturday, and speak to you all soon. Hare Bol.